welcome to our Rob. School District Committee meeting.
Dennis and Rob.
Mr. President cannot be here tonight. He is ill, not feeling well, so Kathy and I are going to take over the duties of presenting. Let's first have a moment of silence, and we'll move into the pledge of allegiance.
Flag, United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
All right, welcome. We're gonna Kathy,
We're gonna start
our
off-
first presenter.
Let's start today with MTS presentation. We had some, I guess, research in different programs. We just instilled MTSS back into the K-8 buildings. There's a lot of data tracking for behavior and academics. We looked at a couple different programs. So we're looking into this program. We wanted to bring it to committee just to let you know what we saw. People had gone out to Pittsburgh to see this program, and the representatives came here. So we have Dr. Zajewicki here, who's going to present. We have Ann McManus, who's also here from the company, and there she is in the back. Thank you for coming. And for later.
Thanks, Sam.
Just real quick, a little bit about myself. I'm a retired superintendent. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm a retired superintendent from New Jersey. I was the superintendent for 11 years. Also did 11 years working for the Rutgers Center for Effective School Practices, where I still have an appointment where I've worked with over 265 districts on implementing MTSS. And then when I retired, I decided to work with Renaissance Learning to be a partner for me during that. I was also a board member and a curriculum committee chair for the Sparta Township School District, and also the finance committee chair. I'm the only person who Sparta, New Jersey, yeah.
My brother teaches in Sparta.
Oh, really? What's his name?
Steve Frazier.
Oh my gosh! It is such a small world. It is absolutely crazy.
I was
So,
gonna ask
board
you
member,
later
so
what
I
superintendent.
know the burden these meetings can be for you, so I'm gonna try and go as quickly as possible, but at the same time, do all that. If you wanna scan that QR code, I don't know if you wanna do that, you can have my contacts. So if you have further information that you would like to ask me, you can connect me on LinkedIn, see a bunch of webinars that I've done for Ed Week and for district administration and other organizations around MTSS. So when I was a client, I can go back to that for a second if you want to scan it. Sorry, anyone else need to look that? Okay. So when I was a client of Renaissance for 12 years, they would always talk about the mission statement to accelerate learning for everyone. And as a new curriculum director, then as an assistant superintendent, and then as a superintendent, I constantly got peppered by vendors who would come to me and talk about growth. Renaissance was the only partner who came to me and said, hey, to be real with you, growth is great, but what happens with growth is we identify kids in second grade, third grade, and we put them in a basic skills program for a full year. And after that time, we go, wow, they grew 10%. And we all go, yay, growth. And then they get another year of intervention for a full year, and they grow 15%. We all go, yay, growth. And then they get a third year, and they grow another 10%. And everyone's like, wow, look, they grew 35%. Problem is that 35% was not able to get them over the hurdle of changing a full grade level proficiency level. So now they're in 5th grade, and they're still at a 2nd grade reading level. So this is where we get a major disproportionality issue that exists in education in general. It exists in Pennsylvania, and in looking at your data, I see some of it there as well. And so MTSS and Renaissance combined together helped me to do a lot of really good things, which I'll talk about for kids. And so Renaissance was that key partner for me, and it came from this honesty that growth is great, but growth is on the pathway to proficiency. And if we're not honest about proficiency, and if we're not going to see kids to proficiency, we're not going to see the graduation rates that we can deliver for kids. We're going to see lots of behavioral issues. We're going to see lots of issues with attendance and all those other things. So when we talk about our kind of motto at Renaissance, when we talk about seeing every student, we're talking first and foremost, we want to see every single kid graduate. That is a huge mandate, and that's something that the state of Pennsylvania has said for this district, that your goal is to have a 92% graduation rate by 2033. Grad rate is it's the focus of my book. It's my unique area that I focus a lot on. But in order to get to graduation, we have to see kids grow enough that they're proficient year to year. They complete Algebra 1 by the end of 9th grade. they complete geometry by the end of second grade. All of that work that we kind of catch in the high school begins in first and second grade. So to establish this, every kid is an MTSS kid. And the MTSS system is K through 12. And so my work with Rutgers, I got to work with 265 districts. Now with Renaissance, I work with the 80 biggest school districts, so that's LA, that's Miami, and then I also get to work with districts your size, like where I was superintendent. Everywhere you go, it's the same issue, whether it's a district with 300,000 kids or a district with 300 kids. First grade reading level predicates whether kids are on grade level to read in third grade, which is when we expect them to read word problems on their own. If they can't read word problems on their own, they don't feel good about school. Math now becomes a problem, and they don't do well in standardized assessments. That then sets a domino effect in which we start to see behavior problems, and then if kids do not complete Algebra 1 by the end of 9th grade, we start to see non-graduate issues. So we want to make sure that we see kids proficient, they complete Algebra 1 on time, they complete geometry on time, and they graduate on time. And so one of the things that Renaissance did for me was really focus all of the data at an individual student level. And I'll give you an example of exactly what that looks like. So this is me. This is me when I was the brand new superintendent of Weehawken, New Jersey. Weehawken is right across from Manhattan, right on top of the Lincoln Tunnel. I get appointed superintendent, and the time from when I was appointed super to when I took office, my assistant superintendent knew I used Renaissance in my previous rural district in High Point, New Jersey. And so she got all the kids screened with Star Renaissance. And so I came in having screening data on every kid, and we had a 79% graduation rate. So from the time when the kids were screened to my first day, this student, Yarissa Anderhar, dropped out of school. The gentleman over here was my board president. He had been board president for 35 years. My high school principal had been there for 40 years. So when I was having conversations with them about, hey, I want to implement MTSS because I want to attack this graduation rate, they were like, really? Do we got to do all this change? Like, we're going to get a lot of pushback. I'm like, listen, we have graduation rates that are below 90%. Number one, the state's going to come after us. Number two, there's the moral imperative here. But since my appointment and my first day, Yarissa, who we found out from her STAR testing, had a 1,300 Lexile level. She should have been interviewing for Yale, all A's and B's. She dropped out of school. And so I go to the high school principal, I'm like, what happened to Yarissa? He's like, well, she's 16, she can drop out. I'm like, okay, that's great, but like when a kid comes to drop out, do we like lock him in a room and ask him why? Can we find out why are they making this huge life decision? He's like, no, we kind of just, it's a free country, you can come and go. Yarissa dropped out because her mom got cancer, and she literally took her mom's job, slicing meat at the deli counter at the Egg and Pig to support her 5 younger brothers and sisters. So I went to these two guys and I said, hey, I want to implement the MTSS program with a focus on graduation rate, helping all those kids, and I want to bring Yarissa back. They didn't want to do it. So I basically had to say, guys, if you're willing to go to bed tonight and put your head on the pillow, that this girl's out there, then you have to find a new superintendent. So basically the threat of me quitting, they were like, all right, let's go along with this MTSS thing. So I will come back to what happened to Yarissa in a little while. But the late, great Harry Wong, and I know we have some educators here on the board, I'll never forget my new teacher orientation more than 25 years ago. I got to watch the Harry Wong first day of school special, and it hit me, and I still talk about it. It's like when I met my kids, when I met my wife for the first time. When I was sitting in new teacher orientation, and Harry Wong said, greet your kids at the door, show them your high school diploma, show them your college diploma, because baby, we're in the diploma business. Graduation rate is the ultimate measure of what we're doing. And what gets in the way of that are all the ills of society. Public schools, the lightning rod for inequities, for all kinds of socioeconomic issues, all these different things. And so when we look at where we were as a country before the pandemic, the highest graduation rate we hit as a country was an 86% graduation rate. Pennsylvania hit a 97% because Pennsylvania had, as a state, very, very good implementation of MTSS. But even when things were all going well, quote unquote, going well before the pandemic, there was a 15% gap between ESL students, former ELL students, and everybody else. That's when things were going well. That gap is now at about 40%. And when I look at your data, which I'm going to get to in a second, the kids who are not graduating all happen to be in that population. So So one of the things with MTSS is that we want to make sure we're addressing all those subgroups. And so where we are now as a country is that, I'll just pick on my own home state of New Jersey. New Jersey dropped from 96 to 90. That 6% drop in graduation rate is 30,000 kids. That's 30,000 kids who now statistically are more likely to be incarcerated, or less likely to vote, or more likely to live below the poverty line. And so when we look at the data of what has happened from the pandemic, everything has gotten worse. And it's all along those lines of racial subgroup, it's all along those lines of socioeconomic. To give you why, if nothing else, the current class of 2032, I have a son in that class, my youngest son, those are the current 5th graders. They were the babies who were in kindergarten when all the pandemic closures happened. The average kid, average boy, is 33% proficient in reading and 36% proficient in math. Those kids are in 5th grade right now. We're expecting them to pass Algebra 1 in 3 years. There is a wave coming, and guess what? Pandemic learning loss didn't end after 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. Pandemic learning loss is going to be over when the last kid from the class of 2032 either drops out or graduates. And so when I look at your data, this is right off the Pennsylvania DOE website, you currently have an 86.6% graduation rate, and the goal that the state has set for you is to hit 92 in the next 9 years. I think that's completely doable. I will show you my experience. I think if you do this in 3 to 4 years is where we can actually get this done. That translates to kids who live in this community being better prepared for the workforce, being better prepared for when they have their own kids. And when we disaggregate this, the populations of kids, who are those 13% of kids who are not graduating? Kids with IEPs, Hispanic females, and African Americans. Those are the biggest groups that we're seeing within that. And so when we talk about MTSS, the key term here is early warning system. And that has major implications when we talk about a law that was passed a long time ago and reauthorized 20 years ago, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. IDEA is where we have the federal authorization to use what we used to call responsive intervention, but we now call MTSS, as an early warning system in all of our schools for our regular education students, all the way up to the possible identification and classification of kids as special education. So before the pandemic, our early warning system, we called it the ABCs: attendance, behavior, course completion. Not why kids are showing up or not, just do they show up or not. It's my understanding you guys are still having a attendance issue, which is very common. Behavior, not why kids are getting suspended or detentions, just how many. And then course completion. And the course completion data got a little bit fuzzy because it was correlated to state standardized test scores, which there's all kinds of gaps. So late Grant Wiggins jumped in and basically said, hey, let's look at it in the terms of independent reading level. Since the pandemic, we now use what I call the ABCs plus. Knowing every kid's household life. Who do they live with? Is it grandma? Is it 2 parents? What language is spoken at home? Is it foster kid? Every teacher needs to know that about every kid before the first day of school. Then their learner profile. What's their mobility? A kid who's transferring to a new school is at risk these days simply because of stressors like, who am I going to eat lunch with? Who am I going to sit with on the bus? That produces tremendous anxiety for these kids. Never mind if they were on track, continuing status when it comes to tier 2 or tier 3. And then the last piece is trauma. We have more kids who have experienced trauma than ever before for a variety of reasons. Number one, the way we dealt with interpersonal interactions and social emotional issues, completely different. They now handle it on Snapchat. They now handle it in Instagram DMs. They now handle it, in ways that we never would have. We used to get into disagreements with one another, and we would hash it out in the schoolyard, and next day we'd play together. These kids, it's completely different. The other trauma we're seeing is all these kids who have come through the southern border, who have been victims of physical and sexual abuse. You can't just drop them in the fourth grade. So when we're talking about MTSS, there's 2 data sets that we're talking about. On the one side is what we used to call academic response intervention. That's all you're screening through academic measures. What we're seeing now is that if you don't include the non-academic piece, not only you're not doing MTSS, it's only considered academic or TI, not behavioral. It's the behavioral non-academic pieces that are trumping the academics and are eroding all the academic grades. So So when you take that data and combine it with the pedagogy of MTSS, which has been around for 65 years. For those of you who've been in education, you all know Benjamin Bloom. Everyone knows Bloom's taxonomy. Really, the main thing that Bloom contributed to education was mastery-based learning, which was the foundation for MTSS. So when we talk about MTSS and what it is, on the academic side and on the non-academic side, it's these 5 things. One, we screen every kid. We screen every kid. The second thing is we take that screening data and we provide it to the teachers so that the teachers have it so they can differentiate in their classrooms. Based upon their formative assessment data, some kids then get intervention and enrichment. The progress monitoring that comes from that is where you see the response to the intervention. The medical analogies, you come to the emergency room with a pain on your side, you get admitted overnight, they take out your appendix. The next day, if you're doing sit-ups, the doctor's gonna send you home. If you're laying in bed with a fever and you have a rash, they're gonna increase the intervention. And when we talk about the accountability piece, this isn't a gotcha for teachers. We're talking about the transparency that when it comes to MTSS, every single kid is in tier 1, the entire population of students. Then some kids who require intensification and intervention at least 2 times a week are what we call tier 2, whether that's academic or behavioral. And then at tier 3, you have all of the regular education students who are getting interventions and intensification 3 times a week or more, as well as all your kids who have IEPs and 504s. So as a former board member, as a superintendent, as a researcher, we have all sat through presentations that go like this. 80% of the kids were proficient on the 4th grade state assessment. Next slide. 72% of the kids were proficient in math, right? That's not the real story. The real story of what's going on in your buildings, how many kids are in tier 1? That's every kid. How many of those kids are in tier 2 for this intervention cycle of 12 weeks? How many of those kids went back to tier 1? How many of them had to go to tier 3? How many kids in tier 3 had to get a second dose of intervention? How many of them went back to tier 2? And how many of them went back to tier 1? That's the real work of what MTSS is in our schools. Not how many kids are proficient, because when you tell me 80% of kids are proficient, that means there's 20% who are not. So at Renaissance, we have a whole bunch of solutions. I use these. All of our tools are really the industry standards as independently evaluated by the National Center on Intensive Intervention. We organize them now to what we call an ecosystem. We have our assessments, of which STAR is what I use, our practice tools, which is what you do with the kids in the classroom. Tools like Nearpod, tools like Freckle, that's actually how you address those skills. The tool I didn't have, which we now have, and everything is on spreadsheets, is we now have EduClimber. EduClimber is the system that brings together all the data from your student information system, from all of your interventions, your attendance data, that non-academic data, and the academic data together in one place for your architecture. So the thing that we do differently, and that you'll have the support of me on, is that you can buy all of our stuff, and our salespeople will try and get you to do that. But I'm going to tell you right now, your pedagogical approach, your building-based implementation of MTSS that is agnostic to whatever you buy is going to determine whether you hit that 92% graduation rate or whether your 86 decreases to 80 and below that. And so the pedagogy will always trump that. So what we will do is bring together that 65-year-old pedagogy from Benjamin Bloom, combine it with their solutions, and also make sure you're compliant with all the requirements of the state of Pennsylvania, of which MTSS is a requirement that you guys have to implement. So what does it all look like? So what EduClimber looks like is all of that data I told you about from the ABCs Plus. It's one viewpoint that has all of the kids' academic and non-academic data. It brings in all the data from your student information system, your attendance, frequency data on how often kids go to see the nurse, how often they go see the guidance counselor. And how this changes how you do things is your nurse, your guidance counselor, your SRO. Every teacher has all of this information about kids. So here's a scenario. I'm little Robbie. I get into a fight in the middle school cafeteria, and then I throw a tray. After I punch a kid, I throw a tray across the cafeteria, and I get mashed potatoes all over the superintendent's shoes who happen to be visiting that day. Now, your typical assistant principal is going to take that student, bring him in a room, and suspend him. And we're going to talk at the kid. How things change and how it changes the culture with EduClimber is that the adults are coached to stop, review all the data, and then ask questions like this to the kid. Hey, you missed algebra 4 days last week. Why did you go to the nurse last week, 4 days for algebra? What's up with that? I see here in your algebra class, Jose's in that class. class too. That's the boy you got into the fight with. What's going on with Jose? Jose was teasing me because everyone knows my dad got arrested and he got sentenced last week. And so that's why you punched Jose, right? So those non-academic factors cause all these issues. So is he still gonna get suspended? Absolutely. We're not giving him a lollipop and sending him back to school. He's absolutely getting suspended. But when we suspend a kid, if he was a B student, he's coming back as a C student. So he needs academic support. Not only that, that's gonna metastasize into other issues unless we address it and we get that kid counseling and we give him those non-academic supports. That's how EduClimber creates the architecture for your MTSS system. And so we recognize MTSS is very difficult to implement. And so we came up with the 9 that we've identified from all our districts, the 9 main challenges to implementing MTSS. So one of the things that we do is we systematically work with you to address all of those challenges to make sure you meet those. Now, one of the things that I've seen in my own research and in my own experience, so whether it's a district this size or a gigantic district, we have to take some things off our principals' plates, delegate to assistant principals. The principals have to be the person in charge of MTSS. They have to own it for their building as the instructional leader. Their faculty meetings have to turn into PLCs where they look at the data. And so I'm a proud graduate of the Wallace Foundation for Principals. Using that research method, we can coach your principals on how they can be more empathetic and coach teachers in differentiation. And instead of having an observation process like the Danielson model that's kind of a gotcha system, having a process where they actually ask teachers questions about how they use the data to make instructional decisions, where it's coaching. It's not something that's evaluatory. But just to show you how EduClimber, and indulge me for a minute, this is Christian Hernandez. She's now the lead training principal for the New York City Department of Education. She was the principal of Brewster Middle School. She asked me to come to her school to show me how she created an MTSS system for her building that then became the model for her district and the entire BOCES in New York. But this is where she uses the EduClimber tool to provide academic support and behavioral support for the kids in her school. She reduced suspensions by 75% in the first 6 months of using EduClimber.
Christian Hernandez, principal of Henry H. Wells Middle School.
Alicia Manguso, the assistant principal at Henry H. Wells Middle School.
Stephanie Conroy, professional learning coach, Brewster Central School District.
So walk me through your level it up MTSS protocol that you got.
Okay, so this is a flow chart, and I always start with reminding our staff not to be overwhelmed. Everybody has a part in a whole system. So we have data team meetings once a quarter. That consists of administrators, school counselors, our EML coordinator, our AIS specialist. Stephanie's at the table, and we're just looking at student data. So sorting through who is struggling, who may have failed courses, the latest STAR assessment in math and ELA, and any other pertinent data that you feel needs to be reviewed. For example, if the student is already in a tier 2 intervention for math and or ELA.
And we also look at courses for concern.
Courses for concern, could you explain a little bit about
Yes,
that?
the courses for concern are courses with a high failure rate, so then like what is the factor that's coming into play that's affecting that, where that's causing that to be an issue? Is it something, a conversation that needs to happen with the teacher? Is it the demographic of students that are in the class? So those are all things that they talked about in the data team meetings.
That's also followed up with a conversation, so I would sit with the teacher of the course for concern and look at, what additional supports they may need. For example, if they're struggling to differentiate for a Asian population, that may surface, and we get them that support to quickly intervene. So that's one way that you can make it to the MTSS PSD, which is a problem.
I'm going to spare you the rest of this. With the technical skill to, one, administer this and to attend to both these sides, these are the tools our principals need. So this flow chart, this is what the state is expecting each of your principals are able to do. And I can tell you, we have 7 years of research that when you do implement this, this is how you increase graduation rates. This is how you increase attendance. This is how you reduce suspensions. So it's a tool that not only will empower your teachers, but will empower your principals to help your teachers. And so the administration asked me to talk about one other thing with you guys, and that's how can we how can we attend to time? So one of the things that happens most districts will say, hey, we ticked off these 9 elements, and then they still haven't changed their bell schedules. The bell schedules are the same from 20 and 25 years ago. You can look at all the research, and I can tell you anecdotally, a 90-minute block for literacy, first of all, the research shows that anything more than 50 minutes is regressive. The kids' scores actually go down. So these kids who are addicted to TikTok and Snapchat, you know what it's like behaviorally trying to maintain a class of kids to sit in one place for 90 minutes? I can't do that, right? Never mind my own kids, never mind trying to control other people's kids. So we have to find ways to keep the kids moving. And so when it comes to this, time becomes a crucial issue. So we have a solution that we have research on going back 70 years. And that goes back to Benjamin Bloom, and that's what I need now time. And so this is changing our schedules, whether it's at the elementary level or at the secondary level, to include intervention time. Benjamin Bloom got this put into schedules in the late 1970s. We got rid of this time. We got rid of wing time, and we got rid of intervention time at the high school, and we replaced it with study halls, is what we replaced it with. So one of the things you can do is help your principals to look at their schedules where they can find time. So you can take that 90-minute block and turn it into what Benjamin Bloom had, which is to have a 30-minute lab each day. We're actually helping to support the kids. So one of the things we can do is work with your administrators to find ways to revise their schedules to make time for intervention. And so then the last part, as a board member, you're probably saying, well, how do we pay for all this? How do we pay for all these solutions? So one of the things that we try to do is make sure that this is not coming out of your general fund and that it's coming out of grants. So for all of our solutions, we align them to all the federal grants. But one of the things that has happened is there's an entire generation of superintendents and business administrators who have come and gone since IDEA was reauthorized. The federal law actually says you're supposed to spend 15% of your IDEA money on an early warning system. Essentially, use it for MTSS. So right now, you guys are probably using a lot of your Title I money and a lot of your general fund money. So one of the things I can really help you with is look where, one, we can use more of that federal money to implement the system that you're required to do. The other thing as a board, it's really important for you to understand, the more MTSS you do, when you're applying for not only your Title I grant, but your IDEA grant, right now, you guys are leaving money on the table. You guys are just getting money from the feds based upon how many free and reduced lunch kids you have. You have more at-risk kids in your schools than just free and reduced lunch. By capturing that and putting it into the federal system, after 2 years, you will get hundreds of thousands of dollars of more money to help support those kids. But you have to start doing it. And right now, you're not. The guidance on that is 20 years old. The law was reauthorized in 2004. I'm happy to share it with you. The guidance came out in 2008, 2011, 2018, and 2022 on how to do this. And we work with big districts and small districts on how to do this. But just to give you some examples of this. When I was assistant superintendent of High Point, we tied our entire MTSS system to IDEA, implemented a research-based MTSS system. Kids would drop out to go work on farms. This is not far from my house in northwestern New Jersey. We changed the graduation rate from the mid-80s, like you guys, to where now it's perennially over 90%. I've left, the superintendent left. Why is it still going on? Because it's tied to those forever federal dollars. Weehawken, urban school district, high ELL, 99% graduation rate from 79. In Mount Olive, my last district, which was the hardest one, because we were at 89%. So from a board, everyone was like, let's hang up banners. We have an 89% graduation rate. I'm like, but the 10% of kids who didn't graduate, they all happen to be Hispanic, and then white kids with IEPs. So we're just gonna celebrate the other kids. What about the other 10%? That was the hardest work. Now they're at a 97% graduation rate. But when we talk about this, what does it mean for each individual kid? So for each kid in your buildings, when we talk about seeing every student, here's examples of some of those kids. Here's Stephen. Stephen is a kid who your current early warning system is not going to capture because he has good grades. But if you dig deeper into the non-academics, Stephen's a ticking time bomb. He's a kid who, when you transition from 8th grade to 9th grade, should be on a Tier 3 behavioral plan. That's something we can help your staff with. Here's Isha. Isha's from Columbia. She's in 3rd grade. She lives with her younger brother. She's on free lunch after school program. She's in the bilingual program. How do we transition this kid from being in a full bilingual program and make sure that she wants to come to school because she doesn't feel left out? The non-academic piece, if she doesn't like being in school, that attendance issue in third grade, that crucial year, if she fails third grade math, she's gonna be trying to catch up for the rest of her life. That's gonna have earnings implications. You're basically setting her up to not graduate. Julia is an example of a girl, 7th grade, doesn't feel prepared because she's a former ESL student. Some of those tier 2 interventions that are so important in 7th and 8th grade are really what make the difference for that Algebra 1 completion. And then 2 last examples. You all know a kid who's hanging on in high school just because of sports. The number 1 intervention is a graduation coach. By the way, we don't sell that. We don't sell someone to build a relationship with a kid to keep them in school. But the data we give you to manage those interventions can help keep this kid in school. And the last one, next last one, this is a kid from my career. She wound up going to Cornell only after we stopped her from killing herself. Her parents and her worked after school. They couldn't go for after school counseling. She needed those services during the day. The early warning system helped to get the services from the county during the day to give her the mental health supports. And the last example that I would say to you guys as a board that I can exhort you to do, we gotta celebrate MTSS success stories. When I go to everyone's website, there's always a picture of a kid scoring a touchdown. There's always a picture of a valedictorian giving a speech. There's always a picture of a kid tinkering with some robotics. But I never see on any website, here's the comeback kid of the marking period. Here's a kid who went from tier 3 to tier 2 to tier 1. That's the real work. And so when we talk about how this changes communities, Larissa did graduate. She didn't graduate with her class. It was 2 months later. The guys who fought me about implementing MTSS were scrambling to be the ones to take a picture to give her diploma. She graduated. She went into community college. She graduated from Montclair State University. She's in her 2nd year of teaching. Because she was the eldest, she set the example. Her 5 younger brothers and sisters all graduated high school and 3 of them went to college. That is how we change communities. That's what we're talking about with our partnership. Taking your 86% graduation rate and turning it into a 92% graduation rate as a partnership together. That's what we're talking about. I'm happy to answer any of your questions tonight or other times about MTSS, and I appreciate you guys having me. Next time I'm going to drive out earlier in the partnership. So, thank you guys so much. Any questions for me? Yes, thank you.
Does it provide teachers with interventions to try with the students? Or is this still a lot of the information that's there? Is this more a data profile? Where does this fall?
So yeah, so it's absolutely a data profile. The one thing I took out of my slides when we met earlier, because I know it's a committee meeting and you guys are probably like, I need a caffeine IV at this point, I understand that. I can come back and show you. We have something called Renaissance Next, where it actually takes the data and then it says, within your classroom, we're seeing 3 groups of kids. One group that needs a helping hand, one group that's on target, one group that needs help. Here's how you can use our tools to provide the actual targeted interventions. And those targeted interventions that we're talking about, that's the gap between being on proficient and not. So we actually attend to that to get the kids there.
And it provides them with interventions, ideas, and
Correct.
things that
So
they
the EduClimber system.
But that's a separate program than this one. It's an additional piece
So
that ties into
you guys
it.
have STAR now, right? So within STAR Analytics, you guys already have a lot of this information.
Okay.
If you have a practice tool like Freckle, you would then have the Renaissance Next connection, where it would absolutely, for the teachers, give them recommendations on a daily basis, how to meet the needs of each of their kids or 2 groups of students. EduClimber brings all of that data, plus all the data in your student information system, plus any other resource you use, a non-Renaissance tool. And it brings it all together, and it's what we call queries, and it shows and identifies for each kids and the groups of kids, and then even once and it gives you a full intervention library. And once you implement those interventions, it tells you whether they were effective or not.
So this is really the data gathering system to assist with what the teachers are doing in the classroom to give them the whole picture
Yes,
of the
but
student.
EduClimber also has the meeting module, where you house the kids' MTSS plan, where you have all the data that where you're seeing that, and also deciding on what interventions to implement. So right now, teachers are probably like, I don't know what to do. If we were to say, hey, let's turn our 90-minute block into 50-minute instructional, 40-minute lab, what do I do in that lab? EduClimber helps teachers figure that out.
What kind of training needs to go into this for the teachers?
So you get a tremendous amount of training. So first of all, like, I met your fantastic people. I don't work in Pennsylvania. I I work with the biggest district. So you have amazing administrators who inspired me to come here on a Wednesday night in November. So I'll help support you, and we have a whole customer success team that would support you as well. And it's really a year-long process to get you guys fully on board.
Where you'll need time with the teachers to be
Tons.
able to train.
Tons of time.
Okay.
Tons of time with the teachers, tons of time with the administrators. And we support you through the whole way.
Can I ask a loaded cost question?
So I'm not the salesperson.
Okay.
So Ann can talk to you about that. I'm purely the MTSS pedagogy person.
I'm assuming it would be, it's an annual.
Yeah, so it's a whole, yeah, they work out a package and all that.
Okay.
Mrs. Mazzola,
Yes, ma'am.
I have some
Oh, beautiful.
preliminary quotes
Same.
that whenever, you would like
I would love to
to.
see.
Yep, different
Thank you.
ones with different pieces, like the
Appreciate
whole
it.
big wish list piece, and then maybe like a tinier piece to get started and things like that.
Gotcha, thank you.
Yeah, and I would definitely do 1 or 2 sessions for you guys for free as well. Like full back. Any other questions? Yes.
What type of interventions do you have for your tier 3 kids that you said you were trying to get them down to lower levels?
So when I was talking about that, we're talking about the,
Rob, and I just want to
Sure.
mention, we also talked with them about Bass Bridge.
sure, okay.
So that
Yeah,
would be
so-
really more appropriate,
so-
in addition to Steve's and Stars.
So absolutely, so we have DNA, right, which does a whole bunch of formative assessments and those kind of intermediate assessments. And then we also have SABRES and fundamentals, which are those behavioral at-risk screeners. So when it comes to our intervention, so first of all, we're gonna give you a recommended intervention library, and then we customize it with you. So some districts right now, they have no regular education kids in tier 3. Another district that I just worked with last week, they are a specialized, the South Bergen Jointure Commission, where they are the special education center for 17 sending districts. So they're already a tier 3 setting, where then we're layering in MTSS 3 tiers within tier 3, right? So we'll work with you to see what you have in place, number 1. Number 2, to see what interventions you have gaps on and how you want to identify those, and also what your staffing constraints are and all those. But some of the things that I'll give you examples in tier 3. On the behavioral side, I did a whole workshop last week for already in a tier 3 setting, de-escalation for already specialized instruction, right? We also incorporate all kinds of ABA piece. The other thing too is making sure that these kids all have enrichment. And so one of the things that, for that tier 3 conversation, we would talk about the Harvard Edu Design Group and what they've done with personalized success plans and metacognition with those kids. I used to run an MD program for years, so I'd love to.
And it's got the progress monitoring piece and all that.
Absolutely, all of that. And, essentially the personalized success plans are mini IEPs for the kids. And where we're going in the future is to fully integrate all the IEPs. Yes.
What does the timeframe look like for training of the staff?
So really, it's a year-long process, right? So we start with retraining everyone in MTSS, right? And differentiation is one of those things that teachers need to be trained on annually, and it's different now because the teacher's classroom materials. So if you have a textbook from McGraw-Hill or HMH, those materials, they're assuming that 95% of the kids are on grade level. The reality of our classrooms are that 50% of the kids are off grade level. So teachers are scrambling, they're finding resources on the internet. So we need to go over what it's like to do tier 1 differentiation in 2024 because it's completely different from any other. So there's training of the teachers, training of the administrators, we do kind of that pre-work. The onboarding of EduClimber depends upon what data you want. So EduClimber can bring in literally thousands of data points. And you can, triangulate all that for you and tell you where kids are at risk and give you prescriptive interventions and all that stuff. It's how many points of data you guys want to bring in, right? So one of the things I say to folks is, you might want to start out with 20 points of data and then scale up to 200 and 300 and all those different things, but it's going to pull nightly, every night from your student information system and any of the other systems you have, and so it can be overwhelming how much data you're now getting on every single kid because you've never had that before. So it's a full year that we support you the entire way and then beyond. It's literally daily and weekly check-ins from our team.
One of the benefits that we saw with it at the workshop that we went to at New Macomb was that we have the staff pulling the data on our data days and we have accountability sheets that they track all that. All that time they're taking be automatic.
And then
So you're using your teacher resource as more as an instructional rather than pulling the data and
Then you're
spending
worried
all
about
that
what
time.
we're teaching.
Because it's hours.
And I'm happy to connect you, like, with the thousands of districts and boards
Yes.
who have already made this move. You guys can do site visits. I already suggested some other districts in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. I suggest you talk to them as well and see what their journey is like. And, you know, so you can see, you know, how substantial this is and how it really does work. Any other questions? Well, I appreciate you giving me so much time. I really, really do. Take down my information, ask me any questions. Happy to support you guys. And I hope you guys do the right thing. And I'm happy to come back again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, Director Moylan's gonna present the meeting.
Sorry, it was long. But thank you for your service.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I have those pages.
Thanks.
Yeah.
If not, I have more. Yeah, they're on, I didn't turn it on. Good evening. So this is a weekend active panel. It is an interactive panel that the teachers will get out of the classrooms. They can use it independently by itself. It runs the Android OS. They can install any app that's available on the Google Play Store to instruct in the classroom. They also do have the option that they can link their MacBook up to it with a hard wire. And you can mirror it. So the students, if they want to present something to the class, or they want to interact with what the teacher is doing, they can use the screen share app. And connect to it, and the teacher will have access then to see who all is trying to present, so they can pick and choose what student they allow to present on the screen. With COVID money in the previous district I worked in, we bought these and put them in every classroom. I have to say, in all the years I've done IT in school districts, it's probably one of the best pieces of technology I've ever implemented. It engages the students, it keeps the teacher in the front of the classroom. Currently, right now, the setups we have in the classroom is pretty much tethering the teacher to their computer. They're not up in front of the classroom interacting with the digital media that they create for their class.
Ron, can I ask a question?
Sure.
There's smart boards.
What's that?
Are there classrooms without smart boards? Is it, because they should be able to interact?
Most of the small board is no shop. With the
Okay.
shop taken down
Because they were old, the computers that they don't have drivers for them anymore because they're so old. This, the ability to use this completely independently from the computer makes it an incredible tool for them. For instance, this is one, we have 3 seed units that we received from Promethean. Amy Coleman, Sue Becker, and Mary Vermillion have been using these for a couple months in the classroom. Mary was, I was gonna try to get her to come here tonight, she was unable to. But this is the board that was actually in her room. So, to give you an idea, what she does is she pulls up next to her Google Doc with all her lesson plans, all her worksheets, and goes into it. Chapter 2. And she has these worksheets saved, and then she can interact with them.
And you said the students can present from their devices and.
Yes, they can present from their iPad, they can present from, if we ever move towards Chromebooks, they can share the Chromebook screens up to them. It also has the ability with the Promethean software that the teachers can create like say, like polling quizzes for the class. That the students will be able to interact with the board where it will show like live polls, like, you know, do you think the answer is A, do you think the answer is B, and you see how many students in the class think it's A or C, and then you can pull up the results of the quiz. So what she does is this is one that she actually did all the writing in this, and it gives you the option then to write over the top of it. I'm sorry, I haven't been worse as I'm in the world. You can write all the worksheets. You can change the color. You can take what you wrote away, put it back. The beauty of this is then when she does these worksheets and creates, you know, basically is creating that lesson for the day, she can save this then and share it to her students through school. You can also hook a mic up, and while she's doing all the work, do a screen capture of everything that she does through the day in the class, and talk, and it will record everything, and she can then save that, and she can share that. So if a kid gets home and forgets how to do something, they can watch the lecture over. I mean, it's unbelievable the amount of things that we can do. I'm obviously not a teacher, but I've known a lot of teachers that use these things in so many different ways, depending on what type of class they teach. I have never, ever heard a teacher say, I hate these books, ever.
How much training would they need to get up and started?
Promethean typically does maybe like a 4-hour training session. And I actually have the teachers that are so in love with these things that they actually offered to come and train teachers here if I wanted them to.
I didn't look at the quote proposal. What are you looking at, Rob?
So right now, I think it was 142 maybe.
Is it across all grade levels?
Yes, this will put one in every classroom. Every instructional room will get one. The board itself runs $1,500, which interactive projectors are like $2,500. So it's $1,500 for the board. There's a module that goes inside of it, which puts the Android OS on it. That's $200, and then I think it's like $95 for a 5-year warranty. The lifespan on these is about 10 years. So this model is the LX model. It's cheaper. There's a titanium model that's $2,500. That comes with the Android OS on it, but it's Promethean's version of it. you're kind of limited on what, you're limited by what they allow you to put on it. But with this board, by having that module that you buy along with it, if it ever gets outdated, you can remove it, buy another one for $150 or $200 and have them upgraded, and you'll be good to go.
So you're looking at about $280,000?
Yes.
So,
And CDW does finance.
okay, is it a lease that you're doing, or you're purchasing them outright, or is that the lease cost?
No, that's a financing cost.
It's financing cost?
Yes, so they gave us an option for 3 to 5 years, and I believe, I don't have the numbers right. so-
289 or 300. It was over 5 years, about 300,000.
Yeah, with the financing fees. And what was the yearly cost on it?
Usually, oh yeah, you can pay monthly, or you can do a lump sum every year. So say the 60-month annual payment would be $60,156 for 5 years. Or you can pay monthly at $51,186.
So it's 60, they're breaking that down over a course of several years?
Yeah, so there's
60
a
months.
3-year option or a 5-year option.
So do you have that in your budget? Where do you have this money?
We don't need it.
Oh, okay.
It's frozen. I just, if we ever, when we move on to our Apple leases, I mean, this might be, there could be savings there.
Mhm.
If you do something sooner. I think it were, so you could save money.
The reason Rob and I, like, wanted to move up this year is just the fact that, like, the way things are set up in these classrooms, nobody has anything interactive up in front of them.
No, I'm agreeing with you, I
And
just,
we have projectors that are dying, and we're running out of them. And what they're doing with what they were doing up to me coming here, with putting TVs, with the Apple TVs hooked up to them, from what I understand, even the Apple engineers said those Apple TVs are not designed to be doing what they're doing. So we do have a lot of issues.
I don't think it's unreasonable, I mean, $60,000 for a year, but I definitely think it needs to be part of, like, I know Michelle and I talk about this all the time, like, just making sure that it's in the budget, because we can't go over even with the state of what we're saying our budget was and what was approved, so anything over that, so.
Yeah, this would be something we put for next year.
Is there an option of doing to, like, if the financing doesn't work budget-wise, staggering a rollout, you know, whatever it might be, 83, 85, you know? Would you be able to, when you can, Brian, when you can, if we were married, tell me if maybe a month, could you find out what it might be? Would they do any kind of financing if we did a rollout? Sometimes they'll do different pricing on rollouts that make it more expensive. And just curiosity for when we're moving forward on how much it's gonna cost and what a best option might be for budgeting.
Yeah, maybe a staggered rollout, fine with the Apple lease.
Yeah.
What does this run off of, Rob? It's not a mainframe or anything like that.
No, it's completely independent.
Self-contained.
It's self-contained. It has, you can either plug it into the network to connect to the internet, or it has built-in Wi-Fi.
And how about no additional wiring or anything like that in the buildings?
No, the only thing I thought about with, if we did go with these, so there wasn't waste for the TVs that were purchased in the classrooms, would be for, like, mainly like science classes and stuff, with the teachers doing something where maybe kids in the back of the room can't see, that we could maybe move some of those TVs that were used with the Apple TVs to the back of the room. And all you need is an HDMI, there's an HDMI out on this that could run up to there, so it would give multiple views in the classroom. And I mean, one of the other features that are pretty cool is if you just got a simple webcam, you can plug it right into the front of this, and it turns into basically a microscope. You know, if a science teacher's doing something, a art teacher, they can have it hovering over, so all the kids don't have to hover around and see what they're doing. They can put it up on this, and everybody can see.
Whose manufacturing is this?
Promethea.
Promethea.
Yep.
And how long have they been on the market?
They started out, I've used Promethean products for over 15 years. They started out like smart with the interactive boards that the projector shined on it and it tracks the touch of the pen on the board. I have used boards like this made by Blue Sonic, and I've looked at a couple of other ones at different, like trade shows where they have them set up. Promethean's like one of the best in the game. And what they cost compared to others is far cheaper.
And is
Like I
there-
said, Epson interactive projectors are $2,500.
Is there a warranty on them then, Rob?
Yes, 5 years.
Good tool.
And Rob, it's got the same capabilities similar to a smart board. I'm thinking elementary, I've got here, kindergarten, second, where they can slide the different pieces into categories.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Is it compatible at all, or is there an option for compatibility for smart notebook files? Would they work
They
on
can be-
there?
they
Probably
can.
not,
They
but
can be converted.
they can, great, because I know that would be, I would think,
Yes,
big for
there's,
teachers.
There's Active Inspire software that will
Okay.
go on your laptop and you can convert all of them. And
Awesome.
then you can export it to PDF or however you want it. Like, for instance, Mary Million, she had smart notebook files that she then had to convert over to Apple Notes because the smart board wouldn't stop working. Apple Notes then stopped working. So what I found for a lot of her files, we were just working on this week with this, is they could be converted over to PDFs and import it to OneNote, and then she can have them synced between anywhere she wants. She can pull them up, whether it's on this, whether it's on a laptop, on that phone, she can do it from everywhere. Any other questions?
I think definitely this is something, I think we're all for. I mean, I'm speaking without talking with anybody, but so, to put this in the budget for next year, Brian, I would definitely vote for it. Because
Yeah.
I've used this before, I think it is a great teaching tool, and I think if the teachers are excited about it, it's just I think a good use of our money for, $2,000 a teacher.
And my recommendation would be like, we'll put one in every room and then have like one like this on wheels that can be, if you need it. Because there's no sense in putting it in like a conference room that's only used once in a while, where if you have one that's durable, you can.
Are they on stands, or are these gonna be mounted?
They would, we would mount them on the wall
Okay.
in the room. So, the stand is, I think the stand's like, it's like $700 each. So, it's definitely, the ease of putting it just rolling into the room. But one of the concerns, like 2 of the rooms that they're in right now are kindergarten rooms, and that was like the concern, like,
Yeah.
will we be able to mount them because the kids can trip over them.
Thanks, Rob.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, I was shaking the room. Talking in front of people.
You did a good job.
Thank you, Rob.
Mary for
Yep.
told me the same thing.
Next up, we have Charlie, who's gonna review the Act 34 grant, how that.
Good evening,
Good evening.
everyone. As you're well aware, the Act 34 grant came through, but unfortunately, it was only, and I say only because it doesn't even come close to covering portions of the roofs that we need to do. It was roughly 10% of what we applied for. So what I did is I got with the roofing contractor and discussed all 3 roofs. We put our heads together, and the high school roofs, the 2 long hauls here, independent roofs that go from the old building down into the new section here, are the 2 roofs that are critical for repair above any other roof in the district. The science or wood shop wing, closest to the Borough Hall, that roof, we did do some temporary fastening of that roof when we did the front of the building early in the summer. Because the roof is lifting, it's delaminating, and it had buckles in it where it's flopping in the wind. So what we did is we did some temporary fastening of that roof down to the deck to keep it from getting any worse. The cost, I don't know, I didn't write the number down, and forgive me for this. The high school roof was, I believe it was 800,000 or 900,000 of the 3 million that we applied for. And given the amount we were awarded, we're gonna break these two sections of roof down, given this roof over here is in much more need than the front of the roof. But we're gonna break them down so we can see what the cost is associated with each section. And then, once we get those numbers back from them, and this will be well before our next committee meeting in December, we'll have to have a discussion at that time on how we want to proceed.
When can you get it done?
I'm sorry.
How soon can you get it done?
This will not be done until next summer. We have until 2027 to use the funding.
How much?
320.
That's all we got? That's all we got?
Yeah.
It's all we got, 9.7% of what we had asked for.
Yeah.
And we have a
Wow.
25% match with
Yeah.
that.
But it gotta get done.
What's
We
that?
We didn't even get one, so we lost out.
That gotta get done though, that portion of the roof.
Yep.
What's gonna happen over
It's safe for now, and I can go to sleep knowing that roof's not gonna blow off. But if we have a tropical system come through here with 50, 60 mile an hour winds, all bets are off.
Yeah.
That roof is completely delaminated, except for some small sections of it. And if the wind gets under that, pulls one of the caps off and gets under that rubber, it's gonna be in the courtyard. It's gonna be laying in the courtyard.
And we have a bigger
So we have to do something with it.
What's
in
the
the next-
what's the underlayment up there, Rob, or Charlie?
It's all rubber. It's all EPDM.
But what's it fastened to?
It's fastened to the deck.
Made of what?
It's, I'm gonna say galvanized sheeting.
And that's what you fastened it back down to?
Yes. But we made sure we were in the purlings or the trusses.
You weren't in the purlings, the steel?
No, we went through it and down into the support structure to make sure those fasteners were staying.
So
So
what-
if that thing comes off, it's not coming off on those anchors that we put in.
It's all coming off.
And if it comes off, it's gonna, have pieces about that big that are still fastened where we fastened.
So what's the fix there then, Charlie? What are you gonna do?
Well,
What do they have to do?
We have to go across the entire roof and put what's called battens down. It's a reinforced strip that's fastened down into the substructure through the sheeting and insulation. And bites into some good steel. Part of the problem is the old roofing that was up there where they put this EPDM down and glued it, the glue has failed. It's over 22 years old. We found the date on the rubber. It was back to 2001.
So over those batten strips, what are you gonna sheet it with then? What goes on top of
The
that?
same thing, EPDM, right on top of the existing EPDM.
Right back to scratch on that one.
So,
Gonna be beyond scratch.
once they get their numbers back together, the contractor may have to come back out, take a second look at it, because we're breaking it down into two pieces. I'm sure there'll be some kind of exclusion if they don't do both parts at the same time. There may be a remobilization cost if they have to come back out and do the second part at a later date. But that'll all be in their proposal.
Yeah, you gotta keep the rain out of the building, the weather, that's the first thing.
10 Kidder gate and curtain wall. Curtain wall is about, I want to say 60% repointed, meaning they ground out all the grout lines and they're actively putting new grout into the brick joints. The capstone that's on there is going to be coming off next week. We have the metal being manufactured for the top of that wall in place of that capstone. The reason that wall's falling apart is because we never caulked the joints in the capstone. And the copper that's underneath that obviously has been compromised. That water's getting through it and into the wall. So by putting a metal cap on there, we'll never have to caulk it. It'll be permanent, done deal. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna have the guys spray that wall with waterproofing. Once it's done, repaint the inside wall with good paint, so we won't have to touch it for 20 years, maybe.
And primarily, where is that, Charlie?
What's that?
Where is that?
That's in the back, by the water tower,
Okay.
surrounds the chiller, the oil tank, the generator, the propane tanks. They're just basically a 12-inch block, cinder block wall with a laminated brick face that's attached to that block. And then there's a limestone cap that goes on the top that's supposed to shed the water with a piece of copper between the top of the wall and that limestone. The problem is every 5 years you're supposed to re-caulk it, and it's never been touched. The original caulking is in that limestone. We actually have some of that limestone here. If you go down out the main entrance and go all the way down to the left to the entrance where you would walk into my office, there's some of that limestone capping on those walls down there.
That's the old building.
So what are you suggesting we do?
Nothing at this point. When they complete this work, that wall will be finished until spring. Again, we're gonna waterproof the brick, and we're gonna paint the block wall on the inside of the curtain wall, and then it'll be a done deal.
So we have not budgeted any of that money? No.
No, this is part of the chimney work. Remember
Oh,
when we
okay, all right.
extended the chimney? By the way, that seems to be working well. Today, I got to see some visual smoke coming out of that chimney, and there was no essence of that smoke whatsoever. So, and we have gotten 0 complaints to date, as far as I know, from the chimney.
One day we had the
Yeah.
smell, but that was it.
And that, I can live with that one day out of the whole year versus.
What, do you get a
what was
downdraft,
going on.
or you get a downdraft there or something?
Yes.
Holly, yeah.
The gates, the security gates, the posts have been in for, what, 2-3 weeks?
Yeah, I have a question. about
Yeah, and the gates are pre-made, they were ready-made, we're just waiting for the crews to come out and mount the actual gates onto the post, put the caps on, and then I have reflective material to put on them, and then those will be done.
Oh, I have a question, because there was the first set of posts that were put in, that you and I looked at. But now there is a second set of posts that were put in, and I'm not sure what they're for. And I'm concerned because one of the posts, when you come in the main entrance to Penn Kidder, it is right in the center of the front of the building.
That's because that gate is too large to put on one post. So it's 2 gates.
So we're going to be blocking the front of our building?
I'm sorry, what?
We're going, where that circle is in front of the main doors, there was a post directly in the front and
Right next to
center.
the lamp post.
No,
About that big, silver,
Yeah.
about this tall.
it's front and center of the building.
Yeah.
So the gate is going to be blocking the front of our building like that?
No, it's gonna be blocking the driveway.
Then what's the other post there?
The other post is to hold the gate when it's open. There's a big that post that holds the gate, and then
That
there's
was the
smaller
first,
posts.
one that was put in.
Yeah, and then there's smaller ones also that were put in at the same time. That smaller post is just to hold the gate open so it doesn't come and take a child out or you walk into your car when it's windy and.
Are the gates on a hinge or Charlie?
Yeah.
Hinge.
Oh, yeah.
Let's take a look at that tomorrow and talk, or
Yeah,
sometime this week.
I'll be up.
Okay, the other thing I wanted to mention
Yeah.
was, do we have signs posted for people not to be disposing trash on our property? Because the one day Miss Mass and I walked around, I don't remember what we were doing, but we walked the perimeter and around the building. I pulled out half of a lawnmower, push lawnmower, and there were tires that are being, I pulled it out of the woods because as I walked by, I saw it, and I'm like, why is there a lawnmower here?
I see.
And then there were also tires found that people are tossing in there, so if we don't have signs that say,
That's irrelevant, because littering is a prosecutable fine, it's a prosecutable offense, especially if it's done on government property.
okay,
So we don't need to post no littering on our property.
okay,
Is what
well,
I'm
I was
Just have
just,
to catch them.
Well, that's the.
And none of those things were
Now
ours,
that,
right? It
now that we
wasn't.
have
I would
cameras,
hope our facilities.
now that we have cameras,
Half of a lawnmower
I'm
back
thinking
there.
that somebody pulling out from somewhere, maybe,
But,
you know,
Do you
it
know what,
wasn't
where it
ours
was,
though.
if it would have been near the workshop, you know, where the
Yeah.
pole barn is.
I know where you and Sarah putting this.
Yes, well, if it was the
Wasn't ours.
Mobile workshop,
I was
I would
curious.
have been like, okay, they have it there, they have plans to do something with it, but this was around the one section of woods where nobody's working or
Yeah.
storing anything, and I'm like,
Cameras can
yeah.
catch everything.
Every
But
time they
it,
clean the
just so
ice
if we
road
can
off,
keep, we
they
might
get
need
those
to start
triaxle
keeping an
trucks up
eye
there
on that.
now
If
that
people
we
want-
have functional cameras
They'll dump anything
and
anywhere.
hopefully
Well, this,
operational soon.
the 64 are up.
And dumpsters.
I don't know that there's one in that area, but that's a concern. I mean, people are throwing tires, lawnmowers, things like that. We've got.
That's another reason why we need to.
That's what it is, because you're dragging it up. Off that dog, yeah, the grader off the road.
The driveway behind that.
Yeah,
That's why all that stuff is winding up there. They're pulling in, and they know they can hide, because
Yes.
the tree line's gonna hide them.
right.
And so they get out, throw their stuff, turn around.
Well, you
so
saw when
you-
Jake
like,
took the trees
You
down.
can't see them doing it. so
And
you
the deck,
can't
he
prove
has the
like
deck,
it.
he had a big deck
Well,
out of the
yeah,
back of the
I just wanna make
restaurant.
sure that we take
Facing
any
down towards the
precautions
height
that we
area.
need to.
He got the Ferris wheel.
Because
Next
I don't think
year,
it's
that's
big enough.
in the next year's,
Because
hopefully,
he
over
wants
the
to
summer, we get that
rotate
whole area, just like we did in the
toward the,
front.
toward
take the trees
the
up.
hole,
Kyle's,
so you can move
Kyle's
that
been
way when
working
you're
on
in
that
it.
with the
And the height
front
can move
loader.
this way down the chunk.
Laying in
But
a
it gotta
pile.
go.
That vehicle,
You know
he's
where he
been
wants to
cleaning
run
up
his
those
tram
piles
from?
that had been out front,
Up
and
there,
it's,
Cameron
it's
Park.
much better, so when we get that section
Right.
taken care of, it'll be good.
Or the camera.
Any questions?
No.
Thank you.
Oh, I think Mr. Stahl has something to give us. You talking, Mr. Stahl?
About the suicide policy, I am.
Okay.
Just briefly, only brief.
Hey, Charlie, did we solve
done
the
yet?
bus thing on at Penn Kid? Weren't the buses pinching something off out there?
Oh, I don't know.
The what?
The way the buses were parked, when you meet the teachers or something like that?
Right, we have them moved now when we have, large events such as tonight, parent-teacher conferences,
Right.
our math and reading night. We have them go around the back and they park in a single line along our driveway.
Did that solve it for you then?
It did, but I did mention, to Mr. Presley and Charlie, when that was first brought up about the buses parking at Penn Kidder at the board meeting, I remember being told we would have 4 buses parked there.
Right?
Okay, well, it is up to 8 buses, an IU minibus, and a van. So we more than doubled the amount that we were told.
So we need to knock some trees down and get
So,
some.
no,
No, you're good
we
at
don't
that.
need to knock any more trees down, but I just,
All right.
be aware that it has more than double and the space that they're taking up.
Go ahead,
We're
So
gonna
Mr.
that
see-
could become a problem when they need to plow.
I don't think,
Go ahead.
I know Lori's not here, I don't think we're totally, satisfied with the routes of the busing yet.
Jerry, we're not on busing for tonight. Go ahead, Ms. Stahl.
All right, policy.
Dennis, you'll get down there in time, don't worry. won't
Policy
close.
personnel, we're talking about the suicide awareness prevention policy and response. This is something, a policy we need to have in place. I believe he has it attached here as for Act 71, we need to have this policy in place. We have the template, I think he worked on some of it. I also know there is an addendum to that, 819, the administrative regulation component. We are going to meet, I believe admin are going to meet along with guidance counselors and Lori Reinhardt, and I think possibly nurses on Monday to work on the addendum to that, the 819-AR, the administrative regulation. We need to have that policy in place, and we need to have it attached to receive, to preview it, for the first viewing at the board meeting. Any questions on that policy? That's what we really need to have in place. Finance, it looks like there is nothing in finance. Is that from last year? I think we have nothing on the agenda. If we have any questions on these notes presented tonight, I do want to thank the people that were part of the MTSS and how I know you worked hard that you can speak to the crew that went out and they did the research. And that's something we need to plan for the future, budget-wise and everything.
Sounds very overwhelming, knowing what we've known to with wonders, with just rolling out a new TSS again, with the training, it's, I think it's a good idea, we kind of.
They're aware of what they're doing, like, we need it coming into the future. We do have a data warehouse of performance matters, I'll talk to Mr. Off about that. I mean, this might be able to replace it when that contract runs out, and then has the addition of the intervention fee. So that's something that's future discussion. I don't know what the contract is for performance matters, that right now is our data warehouse. But again, it doesn't have the intervention fees, it doesn't track the behavior and the social emotional component.
Right.
So.
And on the, the IDEA, and she mentioned about 15% needs to be spent on that, we don't believe we're actually spending that on that program right now, so we have to allocate those funds, which from that, about $54,000, which would be 15% over here.
I have one subject that I'd like to have Brian look into. I got 3 or 4 phone calls over the last week, one from an attorney and 3 from other people in the community. They're a little concerned about when we sell our homes at a price higher than what we paid for them, that the buyer of the house is paying these increasing taxes on the house, all right? They want to know how much the Jim Thorpe Area School District is owed in back taxes. And I think you looked into it.
Yeah, I'm waiting, so Hartford County gave me half of the reports I asked for. Elite hasn't given me the report yet, but I'm gonna have the delinquencies and detail of delinquencies hopefully by the end of the week.
All right, can you also, if anybody objects to this, just tell me so. Can you also check around and find some people that are collectors for this?
Yeah, I will ask them.
That I'm,
Does-
go ahead.
Does Berkheimer do that?
We
They
used to
do
have
collection?
Berkheimer.
They all do it, Mary.
Do they?
Yeah, but
Well,
I'd rather
They
sell
all
them,
select.
I'd rather
You-
sell
I think
them
you're
bulk.
thinking about selling our delinquents.
Yeah, I'd rather sell them.
One time, I mean, we have collectors, but
Yeah.
I think you were talking about selling them to a third party.
Right, let them collect it. And I think one figure that was thrown out that people aren't sure about
What was
is
it
that
the
we
last-
are owed a little over 2.1 million
That's what I
in
understand last year.
back sales tax or property taxes to the district. And we are looking at, if we collect 1.2 or even 1, that is money that we do not have, and that is money that he could use
How much
to
was
put
it
that
last
roof
time,
on.
Brian, when we looked into it? We were getting 25 cents on the dollar?
I mean, yeah, the older they get, the less money you get going.
Yes.
And
Fine.
from what I heard, you actually never sell them completely, so if a third party can't collect it, we have to buy it back. So there are some stipulations.
I'd like you to look into that, and then
Yeah, look
we
into
have an
it again.
executive meeting.
It's good to look into it again. How much, Brian, do you know how much our interim collection and assessment went up now? Did you get that figure? I think we won the tax rolls this year.
I think you went up to $700,000. Yep.
The assessment now,
The assessment,
times our millage.
yeah.
How much additional is that? Because there's a lot more than, I talked to the solicitor that does it for us, you know, he does it for Panther Valley also, you know, and he says the
Yeah.
solicitor.
Look into it if you would, please.
I will.
Anything else?
Good idea.
Thank you very much.
Motion to adjourn. Okay, next week travel.
How much, Brian?
Thank you.
I'll bring the information on Wednesday.
Okay. Maybe we can find somebody to buy them outright, we don't have to buy them back.